Hi guys, what's going on, and welcome back to another episode of Conqueror's Blade. So I was kind of thinking, what do I want to do that's kind of going to set my channel apart a little bit from some of the other Conqueror's Blade channels, and what's going to be sort of useful to the community. Because I'm sure if you've been watching me for a while now, I'm not the greatest at gameplay, but I'm normally pretty good at theory crafting. And that's something a few people also mentioned in the comments, and I think it was quite a good point. And so I was kind of thinking, what can we explore into that's going to be useful and kind of dig down a little bit into the statistics? And that's kind of what today's video is going to be all about. We're going to be digging down into some of the different unit statistics, i.e. the NPC units you can take into battle with you, kind of see which is better, which is worse, and how it's going to impact on you over the course of the battle. So that's kind of what I wanted to have a look at today. It's going to be a bit of a mathsy based one, no actual sort of gameplay footage, so we'll have to kind of see. It might not be something that you're interested in, but hopefully it is at least useful. So if we go into our barracks tab and kind of see just some of the units I've got going at the moment. And the two that I want to look at today are the Levy Swordsman and the Domain Swordsman. Interestingly, I actually looked this word up. It's actually supposedly pronounced domain, which I've always been trying to pronounce it Demensny or something like that, but Domain Swordsman apparently. And if we go over to the unit tree and go to Astaria, you'll see that at tier 1 we get the Levy Swordsman, and then at tier 2 we unlock the Domain Swordsman, which is supposedly a superior unit to the Levy Swordsman. But I don't know about you, but I have found that over the course of the battles I seem to do as well, if not better, with my Levy Swordsman than I do with my Domain Swordsman. And I'm just kind of wondering why this is, and is there actually anything to the basis or the assumption that the Levy Swordsman might actually be a superior unit to the tier 2 Domain Swordsman? So I wanted to dig into the statistics to see if that's actually the case, at least on paper. And it's kind of interesting. So a few things that are worth qualifying before we get into this. One, my Levy Swordsman are tier 6, whereas my Domain Swordsman are tier 4. So that's going to have a slight impact, although with the statistics I've kind of factored in for that. But it's also worth considering that in any real account, you're going to be getting these Levy Swordsmen first, so it's more than likely that these guys are always going to be significantly higher tier than your Domain Swordsman, because you'll be playing with these up until level 15 or whatever it is, and before you actually unlock the Domain Swordsman anyway, so these are more than likely to be a higher tier. The other thing to consider, if we go out to my camp, is that I have been doing a little bit of research in the Scholar's Hut, which has increased my Swordsman's range resistance, swordsman unit slashing damage, blunt damage, and piercing damage. But that applies to all swordsman units, so that applies to both the Domain Swordsman and the Levy Swordsman. But that's why some of my statistics may be very slightly higher or lower, depending on how far you've researched down here, than on your own account. So it's just worth pointing out. So back over to here. Let's flick over to my Excel document, and this will perhaps show us in a little bit clearer detail kind of what I've been looking at. So we've got the two units here. We've got our Levy Swordsman here, our tier 1s, and our tier 2 Domain Swordsman on this side. Now if you've had a look at both, you'll see that the Levy Swordsman get 40 men per unit, whereas the Domain Swordsman only get 32. That's the first thing to consider. You're losing 8 units by switching over to the tier 2 version. And then you'll see down here, where a box is green, that shows the sort of winning statistic. And you'll consider with Swordsman that the important factors are slashing armor penetration and slashing damage. Because if you watch these guys in animation, that is pretty much the primary move they make. They slash with their swords. So that's where the bulk of your damage is coming from. We don't really see them shield bash or doing any blunt damage very often. So, things like blunt damage, blunt armor penetration, not really very relevant because it's not a statistic that's going to be heavily used by the two units. So first things you'll notice is the hit points. Pretty much identical, and there are no extra controlling factors affecting this. It's not something that's upgraded with the unit upgrades or the veterancy points or anything, so both have pretty much identical hit points with a very slight advantage to the Domain Swordsman. But as soon as we come down to the two important statistics, slashing armor penetration and slashing damage, you'll see that the slashing damage is significantly higher on the Levy Swordsman than it is on the Domain Swordsman. And if we just flick back over into the game, you'll see that the unit upgrades on the Domain Swordsman, they've got the full 30% damage increase, which is exactly the same as the Levy Swordsman. The only advantage the Levy Swordsman have got is in armor penetration, which is 30% better. So you'll see that per hit, these Levy Swordsmen are doing significantly more damage per hit than the Domain Swordsman at tier 2. Okay, that's interesting, kind of falling down already. Then if we look at the slashing armor penetration, at first glance it's significantly higher than the Domain Swordsman, but remember, These guys have got a 30% buff over and above the Domain Swordsman, which you can see I factored in here, but they still, the Domain, even with a 30% buff factored in, it is still lower than that of the levies. All in all, it's not looking that good. You know, yes, the Domain Swordsman has advantages in things like blunt damage, slightly better defensive statistics as well across the board. In blunt defense, slashing defense, and piercing defense is all that bit higher, but not massively so. We're talking, you know, 5-10% higher, nothing massive. And if you look at the combined unit health, i.e. the 40 times the unit health and 32 times the unit health, you'll see that the Levy Swordsman has a significantly higher combined unit health by the factor of about 50,000 points. So what's that, like 16%, something like that? Quite a lot higher in terms of total health. And I think that kind of goes to my point that I think the Levy Swordsman is better. The extra units, you know, the Domain Swordsman get little or no buffs across the board to their statistics compared to the Tier 1 version. And I find it hard to see the benefits over and above, particularly once you factor into account things like the leadership cost of these is only 90, whereas if you want to take the Domain Swordsman, it's 140, so you're paying an extra 50 leadership just to take these Tier 2 versions, and I don't think they are an improvement. Maybe the only things I could see that they get benefit is that they get the cover commander ability. You know, they have a shield rush, they also have a cover commander ability, but you know, I don't really use that very often in combat. I've not seen many people who do. I think both units get the shield rush, which is their main offensive ability, so there's not a major influence there. So yes, so all in all, my conclusion was, if you're short on leadership, you know, obviously you can certainly have both units in your barracks, because they're both pretty comparable, but I think the units are nearly identical. Get a slight increase to stats, but realistically, the extra 8 units you get out of this unit and the lower leadership cost makes this the better option, particularly when you consider that this unit is much more likely to be further upgraded at Tier 1 because you're going to be playing with this right at the start of the game. So yeah, I think the Domain Swordsman need a buff is kind of, I guess, what I'm saying, because it just doesn't seem comparable to the Tier 1 version. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say about today. One other very, very brief thing I just discovered when I was looking around here is terrain effects. A very hidden little statistic of which impact I don't know. It doesn't actually tell you any of its impacts. It's probably more of an open world effect, but I just noticed it was urban great, desert bad. And then I just had a quick flick over to the cavalry and I noticed that this says urban poor, but desert fair. So it's kind of obviously going to have impacts into their fighting performance in the open world. But we don't quite know how that's going to take effect yet because I don't know enough about those statistics. But anyway, hopefully that wasn't too boring as a bit of a maths type video, and I kind of want to know if that's something that's interesting to you guys as these video types, highlighting some of these issues, or if not issues, highlighting some of these gameplay metas that will kind of hopefully improve your gameplay. Because I'm not the best at the gameplay, but this sort of stuff, I'm good at this sort of stuff. So yeah, hopefully that was easy enough to understand and vaguely enjoyable. If it is, please give the video a like and let me know what you think in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel for obviously lots more Conqueror's Blade gameplay and statistics, and I shall see you all on the next video.